Once Brad Pitt stood at the center of the world's attention. Perfect profile, casual grin. Hollywood's boy born to be king. To millions he symbolized what it meant to have it all. But inside the glare of cameras and the roar of applause there lived a question, a silent ache that fame could never fill. Now at 61, Brad has spoken what few expected. Amidst the legends, the films, the ever-turning spotlight, there was one woman who mattered more than the rest. He called her the love of his life. This isn't a star-making moment. It's the unraveling of a story we thought we knew, and the discovery of something deeper, something real. For decades, the headlines told us who Brad Pitt was, but now the quiet voice inside reveals who he truly is. And what if the woman by his side once wasn't just a chapter, but the heart of his entire book? In today's story, we'll walk with him through fame and fall, through loneliness and confession, to uncover what it takes to be the kind of love that changes a life. Because when the lights fade, only truth remains. And Brad Pitt's truth is finally out. From his earliest days on screen, Brad Pitt seemed touched by something golden. The boy from Missouri, who once dreamed of a different kind of life, walked onto a set and never truly left the light again. Hollywood didn't just welcome him, it claimed him. With every film, every photograph, every red carpet glance, he became a symbol of perfection. The man the world believed had no cracks. The ascent looked effortless, almost fated, as if he were born to belong to the cameras. But behind every triumph lived a quieter truth. The child who once stood at the edge of every room, unseen, still lingered inside him. That boy never stopped watching. He learned early how to smile through longing, how to wear charm like armor, how to fill silences with charisma, so no one would hear the echo of loneliness underneath. Years of acclaim, of being the face everyone desired, only deepened that hidden ache. What Brad Pitt longed for wasn't applause, it was belonging. He wanted to be known not for who the world imagined, but for who he truly was when the lights went out. In Hollywood, people loved Brad Pitt, the icon. They loved his easy laugh, the tilt of his head, the myth of the man they projected onto him. But the woman who would become the love of his life saw something far more delicate. She saw the man beneath the myth, the one still unfinished, still reaching for something real. She recognized the pauses between his words, the way his eyes drifted when conversation turned to childhood. She noticed the quiet fatigue that comes from always being enough in a world that measures worth in headlines. Where others adored the surface, she listened for the truth beneath it. She saw not the star who conquered Hollywood, but the soul who sometimes didn't know where home was anymore. She saw the restlessness that fame could never soothe, and in that recognition, she gave him what he didn't know he was missing: understanding. To be loved by him required something rare. It wasn't about standing in the glow of his spotlight, it was about stepping into his shadows. She had to hold the man who had mastered performance but not peace, who could transform into anyone on screen but was still learning how to simply be himself. She stayed steady through the applause and the silence alike, because the true heart of his story was never his success. It was the nights behind it, the ones no camera captured, when the weight of being Brad Pitt fell away and only the quiet remained. She didn't compete with the fame or the frenzy. She entered his stillness. She met the solitude that had followed him since childhood, and didn't try to erase it. She simply sat inside it, her presence soft but unshakable, and in that presence something profound began to shift. The cameras still clicked, the world still watched, but the man they adored was changing. For the first time, Brad Pitt wasn't chasing validation. He was finding reflection. The woman who saw him didn't ask him to be extraordinary. She invited him to be human, and in doing so she gave him the rarest kind of love, one without conditions. Because she wasn't defined by the role the world expected her to play, she didn't exist to elevate his image or complete his myth. She existed to remind him that beyond the lights and the scripts, he was enough just as he was. Her love didn't amplify his legend, it grounded. She became the mirror he had spent a lifetime searching for, the one that didn't distort him, but finally let him see himself clearly. And that is why when he looks back now, he calls her the love of his life. Not because she made him more, but because she made him whole. Even stars fall. Even men who seem untouchable stumble in ways the cameras never capture. For Brad Pitt, the world had always known the smile, the jawline, the effortless charm, but few glimpsed the fractures beneath. Blockbusters, magazine covers, endless applause. They built a dazzling fortress around him. Yet inside, that same boy who once watched from the edge still waited, still questioned, still feared the emptiness he had carried since childhood. As the years went on, life's shadows grew longer. Relationships that once seemed unbreakable frayed at the edges. Love arrived, then departed, leaving behind echoes of longing he could not name. Fame was no longer armor, it became a mirror reflecting what he had long tried to hide: vulnerability. He had learned to perform, to charm, to conquer, but he had not yet learned to rest, to be quiet with himself. That man, unmasked and exhausted, was lonely in a way that only silence could reveal. Divorces, public scandals, whispers of excess, they were not just headlines to Brad Pitt, they were reminders of the human fragility that no award could protect. There were nights when he faced the mirror and barely recognized the reflection staring back. A man who had everything and yet felt bereft. The facades of celebrity could no longer shield him from the truth he had avoided for decades. Success could never fill the hollow spaces left by love unclaimed, by childhood unmet, by a self he had never fully embraced. It was during these moments of reckoning that the woman who would become his true love entered, not as a savior, not as a fan, not as a companion of convenience, but as witness. She did not offer solutions or cures. She did not step into the light with him to bask in public adoration. She simply remained, unshaken, and allowed him to face himself without judgment. Presence, she offered. Stability, she offered. And in that quiet constancy, Brad began to experience something he had rarely known: safety. The greatest love stories are not forged in moments of triumph, but in moments of surrender. She was there when the cameras stopped, when the parties ended, when the applause faded into silence. She stayed when friends disappeared, when family distance widened, when he doubted whether he could even be loved at all. And in staying, she reflected back to him the man he had long hidden, the man who still deserved to be seen. Through her unwavering presence, Brad confronted his own fragility. He learned to navigate the quiet, to sit with discomfort, to allow grief, shame, and fear to move through him rather than define him. In those nights of reckoning, he discovered that strength was not the absence of fear, but the courage to face it. He realized that being human, truly unguardedly human, was not weakness. It was perhaps the only path to being loved completely. In the end, the man who had once believed he needed the world's admiration to survive, realized that he needed only one person to see him fully. That revelation did not erase past pain, but it transformed it. It reshaped it from despair into a bridge leading to love. And that woman, steadfast and unflinching, became the mirror through which he learned to stand again, whole, vulnerable, and alive. Because the fall was never the end, it was the beginning, and the reckoning once feared became the doorway through which Brad Pitt finally understood the extraordinary simplicity of true love. Not the fleeting flame of passion, but the enduring warmth of someone who stays when everything else has gone. What does it truly take to become someone's love of a lifetime? Not the fleeting spark that dazzles and fades, nor the headline that glimmers for a moment and disappears, but the kind of love that seeps into the bones, reshapes the heart, and endures when the world stops paying attention. For Brad Pitt, this was never about admiration, beauty, or shared glamour. It was about something quieter, deeper, and far more transformative. She saw him not as the golden boy of Hollywood, not as the award-winning actor whose name carried weight across continents, but as a man who had known loss, longing, and fear. She recognized the spaces between his words, the hesitations behind the jokes, the faint tremor that surfaced in moments of silence. She understood the cost of being enough for everyone else while still feeling unseen. And instead of recoiling, she stayed, offering a refuge built not from spectacle but from simple presence. To be the love of his life, she had to navigate a delicate paradox. She needed to shine and to remain invisible, to celebrate his brilliance while nurturing the man he became when the lights went out. She needed patience that did not waver with his restlessness, strength that did not seek to dominate his struggles, and compassion that did not depend on his perfection. She did not rescue him, nor did she fill his voids. She simply sat with him in their shared humanity, demonstrating that love does not heal by doing, but by truly witnessing. She taught him, without words, that being seen is sometimes the most radical act, that someone can look past the public persona, the awards, the accolades, and simply know you. That quiet acceptance nourishes more deeply than fleeting desire, and genuine understanding outlives any fire of passion. She asked for no part of the legend, no ownership of the myth. She asked only to meet him where he was, in all his unfinishedness. And in doing so, she gave him what he had spent decades chasing, the unshakable assurance of belonging. The woman he would later name as the love of his life did not define herself by proximity to fame. She defined herself by courage, by steadiness, by clarity of heart. Her love required neither drama nor performance. It demanded only that she be willing to stay, to witness, and to hold. It required honesty over flattery, presence over perfection, and constancy over excitement. In this, she became the anchor to the man who had drifted through storms and limelight alike, and the mirror in which he finally learned to see himself without fear. Being the love of someone's life is not a title bestowed lightly. It is a journey of attention, of patience, of deep, unwavering care. For Brad, it was not the movies or the recognition that mattered most. It was her, because she endured, she understood, and she believed. And in that rare kind of love, he discovered what the world could never teach, that the greatest love is the one that finds you not in triumph, but in the quiet, unguarded spaces where your heart has been waiting all along. It came quietly, almost unexpectedly, yet with the weight of everything he had lived. At 61, Brad Pitt spoke words the world had long speculated about, but few truly understood. Words that were not meant for headlines, not crafted for magazine covers or tabloid columns, but meant to capture a truth he had carried alone for decades. She was the love of his life. For a man who had spent years under the world's scrutiny, whose face had been framed in every possible angle, whose charm had been dissected, adored, and criticized, this confession was not about grandeur. It was about recognition that love had found him in the spaces where cameras could not reach. It was acknowledgement of a quiet constancy that had endured when everything else had shifted. To understand the gravity of his words, one must trace the journey behind them. There was the young actor, bright-eyed but uncertain, learning how to perform before an audience that demanded perfection. There was the man who danced between fame and vulnerability, whose smiles hid late-night doubts, whose laughter masked the echoes of loneliness. There was the survivor of fame's isolating glow, navigating relationships fractured by expectation, longing for a love that was steady, not fleeting. And then there was her. She was not the love that made the world swoon. She was not the flame that dazzled in photographs. She was something far rarer, the steady presence that met him where he was, every unguarded corner of him, every hesitation and doubt. She saw the boy who had once watched from the edge, the man who had learned to give the world everything he could, but often left himself empty, and she did not turn away. His confession was not merely an expression of affection. It was a revelation of understanding. To say she was the love of his life was to admit that she had done something no one else could. She had stayed when others left. She had witnessed without judgment. She had offered a sanctuary for the man who had learned to hide. Her love was not loud, not performative, not transactional. It was a quiet, sustaining truth, and in that truth, he had finally found a reflection of himself. In confessing her role in his life, Brad Pitt revealed more than admiration. He revealed gratitude. Gratitude for someone who could hold the weight of his fame without being crushed by it. Gratitude for someone who could enter the quiet moments he had feared, who could walk alongside the parts of him he rarely allowed anyone to see. Gratitude for the courage it took to love a man whose life had always been under public judgment, yet still believed he was worthy of unguarded care. And what does it mean to be the love of someone like Brad Pitt? It means enduring the limelight, yes, but more than that, it means entering the shadow, meeting the unspoken fears, and offering stability where chaos once ruled. It means seeing beyond the surface, beyond the myth, and understanding the fragility hidden beneath perfection. It is not a title earned in moments of passion. It is proven in decades of quiet constancy. His confession is, in essence, a love letter not to her alone, but to the possibility of love itself. It affirms that the truest connection is not forged in grandeur or spectacle, but in endurance, presence, and the courage to remain when everything else fades. She became not just a partner, but a witness, a refuge, and the home he had long sought in the world. When Brad Pitt finally spoke, the world paused, but inside those words was more than recognition. It was redemption, understanding, and the revelation that the love he had long searched for was not about being rescued. It was about being seen. And for a man who had spent decades performing, the gift of being truly known was the most profound love of all. Love, Brad Pitt learned, is measured not in grand gestures, but in quiet constancy. It is found in the courage to remain when the world drifts away, to witness someone fully, without expectation or applause. The woman who became the love of his life offered precisely this, a presence that did not demand perfection, only authenticity. A steady hand when life tilted, a calm when chaos threatened. Through her, he discovered that intimacy is not about merging flawlessly, but about holding space. To love is to allow someone to unfold, to stumble, to be unfinished, and still to remain by their side. She did not attempt to change him, nor to rewrite the parts of him the world had already scrutinized. Instead, she created room for growth, for vulnerability, for the slow, quiet unfolding of a man who had long performed for the world without ever truly resting. She taught him that the most radical act of love is simply to stay, to witness fears without flinching, to meet insecurities without judgment, to celebrate the smallest victories alongside the greatest. That presence, that constancy, became the foundation upon which he learned to trust. Trust in her, trust in himself, trust in the possibility of love that could endure. Through her, Brad realized that enduring love is not a reward for success, but a refuge for the soul. It is the quiet harbor amid turbulence, the gentle beacon that guides one home when everything else collapses. Within that love, he discovered the deepest triumph, the freedom to be fully known, to be truly seen, and to simply exist alongside another without walls, without pretense, without fear. Her love illuminated a universal truth. It does not erase the past. It does not demand perfection. It does not seek control. It endures because it is rooted in patience, understanding, and the courage to meet another fully, without retreat. And in that enduring presence, he found something the world could never give him: the ability to rest, to breathe, and to inhabit his own humanity without fear. Some people leave traces, others transform a life entirely. She was the latter for Brad Pitt, not with grand gestures, but through a quiet insistence on presence, on seeing him fully where he had always hidden. In a world that demanded performance, she reminded him of the courage in simply being. Before her, Brad existed as a reflection of the world's expectations. Every smile, every gaze, every word was rehearsed. He had mastered charm and perfection, yet inside he felt unfinished, untethered, unseen. She did not arrive to rescue him. She arrived to witness him, to hold the spaces he had kept private, the fears he could not name, the loneliness behind every applause. She showed him that intimacy is not about merging perfectly, but about holding space. She stayed when it would have been easier to leave, met vulnerability without judgment, and offered patience instead of pity. In her presence, he learned that resting, pausing, simply existing without performing was not weakness, it was bravery. Step by step, he shed the armor he had carried for decades: charm, confidence, rehearsed smiles that protected him from rejection, but kept him from knowing himself. Through her constancy, he confronted his fears, the terror of abandonment, the weight of always needing to be enough. She did not fix him, she remained. And in that steadfastness, transformation quietly took root. Through her, Brad discovered the man he had never allowed to emerge, the one who could be known without apology, trust without fear, exist without performance. Her love was not spectacle but devotion, not applause but presence. She became the anchor in the drift, the mirror in which he saw himself unmasked, the light that quietly guided him home, and finally the star the world knew learned the brilliance of simply being human, fully seen and fully loved. The world watches, always. Cameras click, headlines scream, and yet the truth of a heart often hides in plain sight. Then, in a moment that seemed both ordinary and monumental, Brad Pitt spoke, finally naming her, the woman who had changed everything, as the love of his life. It was not a declaration of drama, not a grandiose gesture for the tabloids. It was quiet, unforced, profound. In that confession, the world glimpsed what she had always known. Love is not about applause. It is about presence. Love is not about perfection. It is about seeing, enduring, and remaining when no one else does. Brad's words carried decades of understanding. The realization that fame and fortune cannot fill the spaces only intimacy can reach. That being adored by millions does not replace being known by one. She had walked beside him in the shadows, held him in silence, witnessed every flaw, every fear, every vulnerability, and in doing so, had given him the courage to finally acknowledge it publicly. The announcement did more than shock the media. It crystallized a truth. The world rarely admits the most enduring love is quiet, patient, and transformative. It changes the person who receives it before it is ever noticed by anyone else. In naming her, he named himself, the man he had been beneath the myth. And for a moment, the flashing cameras, the roaring crowd, the relentless gaze of Hollywood faded. What remained was simple and unshakable. A man who had learned to be fully human, fully present, and fully loved. That was the confession the world could not ignore. Not because it was scandalous, but because it was real. Time moves differently for those who have loved and lost, for those who have been seen and unseen. Brad Pitt's journey is not just a story of fame, of accolades, of the public gaze. It is a story of being human, of learning to exist fully, and of finding love that transforms from the inside out. In her presence, he discovered what no script, no spotlight, no award could teach: that the most profound victories are invisible, quiet, and deeply personal. It is the ability to rest without performance, to trust without fear, to be known without apology. It is the courage to remain open even after decades of doubt, to meet another fully without expectation, and to allow oneself to be seen. Her love did more than change him. It became a mirror of what enduring love can be: steady, patient, transformative, unwavering. And in naming her, he reminded the world that the greatest triumph is not the life everyone notices, but the life we quietly nurture and hold sacred. Now, when he walks into a room, when the cameras flash, when the world whispers its judgments, He carries a light no one can dim, the light of being fully human, fully present, fully loved. That is the legacy she left, the lesson he learned, and the truth that endures beyond fame. The people who witness us, who stay when no one else does, are the ones who teach us how to live. And in that truth, perhaps, lies the most beautiful story of all. For more emotional stories, check out this video.